Good morning, everyone. Today is the last time for a public talk by Professor Ralph, and today is the topic is about Malaysian English, the localization of a global language. So, please welcome Professor Ralph.
Good morning. Thank you. Okay. Malaysian English is the version of spoken English as used in Malaysia. And let me just follow my notes. First of all, English has spread across the world and has become a global language. At the same time, of course, the speakers in different parts of the world, in different countries, developed localized versions of this English, which may adapt to certain degrees to substrate languages, special vocabulary, and so on. For this reason, there is the research subject of world Englishes. So, variations of English, which nonetheless are still mutually largely understandable, and English still allows communication across all cultures, but there is variation in it. It is not only the first language in several large countries around the world, it is also an official second language in other countries. And finally, it is school-mediated in most other countries of the world. That means that, for example, the majority of the Germans in Germany also know more or less English. For this reason, Cutro, Indian linguist, distinguished the inner, outer, and expanding circle of speakers. The inner circle being the countries where English is the native language of the people, of most people. The outer circle comprises countries where English is an official language, as in India or Singapore, and the expanding circle, which keeps expanding, is comprises those languages where English is taught as an L2. Singapore might be called an English-speaking country today, but Malaysia is not officially, because the language policies towards English were sometimes negative, sometimes positive. From history, from colonial history, of course, Malaysia was English-speaking since longer. Although the English in Malaysia and Singapore is very similar, if not completely the same, Malaysia belongs to the expanding circle, and Singapore maybe to the outer circle. For this reason, Malaysian English is mentioned a little bit less than Singaporean English in the literature. So by world Englishes, we understand non-standard forms of English which develop into local, colloquial, spoken varieties. This also shows us that the seeming total unification of the linguistic landscape of the world under one language is automatically counteracted through localizations based on substratic influences. The term Asian Englishes comprises the English versions spoken in Asia, which are to some degree similar. English was used and is used in Hong Kong, in the Philippines, in Sabah, in Sarawak, and in historical Malaya. In earlier times, pidgins and creoles developed from English along the southern China coast, the so-called China coast pidgin. And on the other side, in Papua New Guinea and the adjacent islands, Tokbisin or Bislama, as well as in Australia, Aboriginal English. All these versions are a little bit more common with each other than with other Englishes in the world. Therefore, the term Asian Englishes. It can be shown, and we will attempt to do that they all show a kind of Chinese or Asian grammatical pattern. Now, English in Malaysia, of course, is situated on a spectrum between the ideal of British Standard English, with maybe a different accent and some peculiarities which are actually criticized about the language, and so-called Malaysian English, or jokingly called Manglish, following the joking terminology Singlish for Singaporean English. And that is a spoken non-standard vernacular which can deviate from standard English so much that it has been called a creoloid or a semi-creole by certain sociolinguists. Malaysian English, we can say, is a nativized form of English because it is nowadays spoken from small age all throughout the life by its speakers. Holmes also called it a partially restructured language because the grammar is obviously different from standard English. It is not the Creole in the proper sense, however, but it has changed so substantially that it gained some independence from English and may not always be fully understandable to an untrained English speaker. So Singaporean English, henceforth abbreviated SE, and Malaysian English, ME, are very similar or maybe the same, but they draw from different substrates to some degree and experience a very different political situation. English is in Singapore the national language, and Singaporean English is frowned upon by language planning. For Malaysia, English is an official language, and Malaysian English is not commented upon. 73% of the Singaporeans are Chinese, with a majority of Hokkien speakers, Hokkien heritage speakers. Malaysia has a population of 50% Malays, 26% Chinese, 10% Tamils, and smaller groups. How to count the Malays is actually a little bit difficult. I think in terms of Bumiputra, nowadays one could say they are 70%. The ethnic Chinese are mostly Cantonese, Hakkas, and Hokkien speakers, at least the older people. So we will discuss today the spoken unregulated vernacular, which we call Malaysian English, and which is not identical with standard English. The various ethnic groups in Malaysia speak various dialects or vernaculars of different languages and orient themselves towards different standard languages. These are Malay, Chinese, Tamil, and English. In the following, I will not refer to Tamil because this affects only the Tamil population, of which I have a little insight. However, for an ethnic Chinese speaker, obviously there are three standard languages available: Malay, Chinese, and English. All people also know vernacular versions of the other languages. So most people can communicate in spoken Malay and in spoken English. The the Chinese will always aim to learn Chinese, by which is meant at least to read and write a little, but also to learn the pronunciation of standard Chinese, Guoyu, Huayu, Putonghua, however this is called. Some family, especially with interethnic couples, may be native speakers of English, or more precisely, of Malaysian English. So spoken vernacular Malaysian English is part of the identity construction of multilingual Malaysians, as English presents a ethnically neutral language not associated with any one group. For ethnic non-Malays, English represents the language of national identity and, at the same time, an interethnic lingua franca and a global language. Educational aspirations of Chinese aim at learning Chinese and English. On the other hand, they have to learn Malay, but see it mostly as a local means of communication. In this contribution, we will focus on Malay and Chinese speakers and not the Tamil speakers. So, to be clear, there are always ideals of a standard language which are never reached in a spoken form. And then there are local standards, which is the way a standard language is really used. And then there are local vernaculars, which means the unregulated form, which often has no prestige or only covert prestige. A few words on history and language policies. During colonial time, English was mostly learned by Chinese, and Malays were attending Malay schools. Higher education would use English. This gave a certain advantage to the ethnic Chinese. After independence, according to Malaysian policies, English should actually phase out in favor of the national language Malay. But English remained important while receiving ambiguous policies. Today, it is an official language, which means one can use it in the administration and so on. Like most other states, the newly formed Malaysian state wanted to create a nation state based on Malay ethnicity, Islam, Malay language, and Malay customs. This is, as in every other state, difficult, given that there are large proportions of the population who are not fitting this definition. The new state of Malaysia granted citizenship to the non-Malay citizens in the country, as opposed to Indonesia, but it created a state ideology based on the concept of Bumi Putera, which means sons of the earth, and thereby introducing a racial distinction in citizenship. By Bumiputra, they mean the people who have always been there, by which they mean the Malays and the Aboriginal groups, but mostly it favors Islamic Malays. After riots against the Chinese in the beginning of the country, the introduction of the so-called new economic policy favors Bumiputras in many ways. So there are many aspects of affirmative action towards Malays, which is nothing else but the discrimination, of course, of non-Malay citizens. Such attitudes make assimilation of non-Malays to a uniform Malay identity impossible. This attitude will certainly further support non-Malays' orientation toward other cultural and linguistic resources. the development of any Creole language was not as direct as it may have been originally depicted. First generations may learn the superstratic language well, and only following generations create a pidgin from that, which stabilizes into a Creole. Similarly, English was always taught at Malaysian schools in its standard form, and it is not entirely clear when the particular local Creole-like version of Malaysian English emerged. Although Malaysian English has been described in the 1970s already, it has been also attributed to the fact that English was abolished in Malaysian public schools in the time from 1981 to 1993, which left the speaking of English completely unregulated. From then on, teachers would again teach in English and the English language, but introduce a lot of local variety in classes, as has been investigated. Many studies anyway focus on the educational domain, with British English as the mother language and Malaysian English as the problem. The colloquial version, as really spoken in the streets, is much less discussed. Private Chinese schools never interrupted English education. They switched to Huayu, Putonghua, Standard Chinese, and simplified Chinese and Pinyin from 1981 onwards. Unfortunately, the grades from such schools are not recognized by the Malaysian administration. Students from private schools, however, are quite good in English and can switch between Standard English and Malaysian English. In Singapore, the Singaporean version of English has been frowned upon from language policies, and there was a so-called Speak Good English campaign, which promoted a standard form of English, but faced some popular resistance from movie makers and artists such as Jack Neo, Phua Chu Kang, and others. This shows clearly that Singaporean English is already part of identity formation, that it has covert prestige for the speakers. So here is a movie advertisement, Money No Enough, that is Singaporean English. For many people might call Malaysian English just a slang. That is the typical language attitude of many speakers. Linguists would not see that as a slang, but rather as a dialect or sociolect, which is used as an in-group marker and for colloquial, emotionally loaded, friendly, basilectal communication. So the socio-pragmatic game is to be able to speak Malaysian English with your friends and to switch to Standard English if necessary. It is also the case that for some families in Malaysia, English is the first language, especially for inter-ethnic families. For instance, the so-called Chindians. These are people where Chinese and Indians married, and they end up speaking English together. Among the older people, the people who still received education in Malaya, in English, in British Malaya, they may be very good in English and rather bad or incapable in written Chinese, and did not learn much in Chinese and Malay. Those who attended private Chinese schools, of course, they are very good in Chinese and English and had Malay only like a foreign language. And those who attend public schools, they learn Malay before everything else, some English, and may try to learn Chinese privately. So this is the situation of Chinese speakers. for instance, on this picture, some of these Hakka speakers in Kajang near Kuala Lumpur were actually English speakers. Of course, Standard Malay is learned at schools, but it is interesting to note that spoken Malay is also markedly different from Standard Malay. And spoken Malay, in short, seems to derive from the lingua franca of the region, which was learned by many non-Malay speakers and therefore experienced a certain simplification of the morphology. So it seems that in spoken Malay, both for Malay and Chinese speakers, it is perfectly reasonable and possible to omit many of the Malay affixes and to use analytic forms instead. So we find a dichotomy in every single language between a standard language as taught at schools and a spoken variety, which deviates quite heavily from the standard form. Of course, all standard languages serve as high registers for acrolectal communication. But in private communication, the other variety is used. So, first of all these languages in the spoken forms show a high degree of convergence. Convergence means an increase in similarities between two languages in grammar. And this comes from a pattern transfer because obviously a substratic language, so the native language of the speakers, influences the use of another language. There is, of course, a high amount of language contact and multilingualism in Malaysia. So let's imagine a speaker of Hakka in Kuala Lumpur will certainly also understand Cantonese, maybe pick up Hokkien and something else. Then, of course, use English and, of course, know Malay, both in spoken form and to some degree in the standard form. In this way, of course, borrowing and code switching is extremely frequent, and we find loan words in almost every utterance. So here is, for instance, a comparison between Hakka, Cantonese, Hokkien, Malaysian Mandarin, and Malaysian English. In Malaysian English, one might say, the bus, if you don't Dahan, it won't stop one. Dahan is Malay for hold, yeah. And the one I will explain a little bit later. And now look at the Hakka utterance, abata, the bus, ngi mau tahan gi, geben tine. So again, tahan is used if you don't stop, if you don't hold it, if you don't give sign. And the same for Cantonese and so on. And even in Malaysian Mandarin, naga bas ni pu tahan ta puting da. So that's the way they speak standard Chinese. Yeah, people will sometimes on the internet joke about their English as being non-standard, and this, of course, is a vast exaggeration. But you can see an imagined English letter. Hello, manager. April clear. Tomorrow is our Chinese very important day. All of our family member must be went to mountain to sweep the stone and so on. So only understandable in the cultural context and not correct English, of course. So this is never-ending source of joking. Now to our data, I want to show language data to give this theoretical consideration some background. Since 2017, we have investigated languages in Malaysia, of course also English, through participant observation, the recording of spontaneous speech, also asking people to speak Malaysian English intentionally, because they might not do that with a foreigner, actually. Just listening to people in friendly environments. Long interviews in informal atmosphere where we experience a lot of unconscious use of ME, even while criticizing this language. Translation tasks also after instruction, such as imagine the situation, how would you say to your friend? And then also acceptability judgments, whether they accept or not a certain utterance. Mostly we have worked with Chinese speakers, few Malays, and very few Tamils. So here's another joke from the internet. Maybe you can manage to read it. It is written in not in phonetic script. Apengwa, your government say no talks English anymore. So your government says you cannot talk Singaporean English anymore. Ayo, so poor thing, so poor thing. Never mind la, never mind. Yeah. Next time you want to talk English, call me on my handphone. We can talk English, Manglish, but Manglish so far not yet banned in Malaysia. So just for the fun. Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on phonology, but there is no distinction lax tense, just in these Semitic languages. The vowel length is neutralized to a mid-length. So where's an example? They will say Japanese or market. And what else? A stick is both a steak and stick, is not distinguished. Men, always the same pronunciation, so there's no distinction, man, men. Expensive, chicken, like that. The and the of English is often not realized, so they say that and they and think, ding, and thank you. Also tree and true. Of course, it depends on how well they learned English. The L is often vocalized, yourself, help, is at the end of words. Yeah, the intervocalically also, soli, lo, like that. Aspirations also minimal or not present, and consonant clusters in the coda are usually reduced, so they say las and not last. Well, I won, I have a friend, I find, and so on. So you get the general idea from that. Phonological contractions also happen a lot. So now about the words, they all the languages in Malaysia, or all speakers, share a pool of words from the same languages and can partially exchange them. So also there are many jokes about how to name something. Let's start with Chinese words in English. You might hear a joking insult, you see Ang Mo. You damn foreigner. You see Guilo. So one word would be Hokkien, the other would be Cantonese. Guilo and Ang Mo, red hair. One can exchange these words in dependence on who is the speaker, or who are you speaking to, or in which context you're speaking. One might hear, why you so Chonghei one? Yeah, why do you keep repeating this all the time? So that's a Chinese word. Why so Tamwan? Why are you so miserable? Or why are you so Gangchangwan? Why are you so nervous? So here a lot of Cantonese. This one, Subsuela. This is very easy. So this would be difficult to understand for an outsider, of course. And it requires Cantonese speakers nearby. What is used very regularly, can tabao for me? Tabao, take away. Don't worry, I gaudim for you. I settle this for you. We had this fun conversation. What do you want to drink? Chin Chai la, Chin Chai Chinese, whatever. Here got no Chin Chai. Sorry, Hakka whatever. Yeah. And here got no Chin Chai, Chinese vegetables. Here got kopi tio juice. You want Chin Chai, you go to Bazaar. So, I mean, this is of course joking around, but it works that way. Yeah. Or let me read here, just small matter only, and you kaube kaubu already. Kaube kaubu, Hokkien, and you crumble. Holiday only, stay at home, very siena. That is boring. And so on. Gebo. Kiasi. He kiasi wan la. He is very timid. So there are many Chinese words in Malaysian English if the other people understand these varieties. Malay words, of course, enter the language as well. Why use the lit one? Mai ka xiao la. Mai is actually Hokkien, not want, not you shouldn't. And ka xiao is Malay. And then I kena saman by Mada. I was fined by police. So Mada is from Mata Mata, and it among older speakers, at least, it has the meaning police. Kena is also a Malay word, and that's particularly interesting because it creates very regularly passive forms in both in spoken Malay and in Malaysian English. It is sometimes difficult to tell which language is actually used. One example I used many times already. Kibun mada lokapoi. He is Hakka, he. Bun is Hakka, to give, which is a passive marker. By police, that is Malay. Lokap is English, to catch. And hoi is the change of state marker from Hakka Chinese. So actually, this is a Hakka utterance, but it contains Malay and English words to a very high degree. One can observe the usage, and we did so, the usage of certain verbs. So we already had an example with Dahan, stop the bus. Faster Dahan, the taxi, late already. So stop a taxi quickly. Faster Dahan, the taxi. We just had this example. I got Dahan by Mada. I was stopped by the police. And then we have this function. Why are you leaving? I pe Dahan liao. That is English. So pe is Hokkien, cannot. Dahan is Malay, I cannot stand. And liao is the change of state marker of Chinese. Yeah. So I pe Dahan liao, so tired already, go home, sleep. That's typically Malaysian English, like the subjects are omitted. Yeah? I go home, sleep. Very short utterances and so on. Basa Malam means night market. It's usually pronounced Basak Malam by the Chinese speakers. And so the utterance would be tonight, Wekot Basak Malama. Wekot is practically an idiomatic phrase. Is there. Yeah. So there are many Malay words one might mention here, which appear very often in the speech. So for instance, where was I just saw it, Panay. Now I cannot find it anymore. Here, Pandai, Malay, is pronounced Panay. Now look at, no, it's not in this example, sorry. I thought this is now in the following example. But let's look at this example. If you do it wrong, you sure kenahantam. Kenahantam is the passive formation with the Malay word kena and the Malay to beat. So you will be beaten, you will be scolded by boss. Yeah. So again, a passive. Jaga is a security guard, and you jaga for me, so you take care of my stuff. Yeah. We cannot read all the examples, I assume. Yeah. There are also repetitions here, I see. Let's move to English words which changed their form in Malaysian English. For instance, kostan. Kostan means to reverse the car. And it comes from English, go astern. And, or for instance, to charge the battery, maybe chat den. So charge is pronounced chat, and den is, of course, haka for electricity. Or to pay the parking fee, bun parking lui. Lui is the general word for money. Bun is to give in Hakka, bun parking lui. Auda means lousy, like out of order. We don't know for sure. Why this machine so outer one? And then there are many few things such as open fan, which means switch on, and open door and close fan, switch off. Yeah, which of course are copies from Chinese use. Then when you go to a kopitiam, which is a Chinese word for coffee shop, then you may order kopi o, and o is Hokkien black. And te bang, te of course, and bang is cold from Chinese. So roti bakar, roti is actually Indian, I believe, and bakar Malay is a toast. So there are many, many such words, and that's why actually the Malaysian speakers called their way of speaking Bahasa Rojak, which means language mix. And Rojak is a name for a salad mix normally. Yeah. Of course, culture-specific terminology can often not be translated, and so one might find utterances such as tonight anong datsai, you go or not. There is no word for datsai in English. And if one would speak to a speaker of, for instance, Hokkien, one may choose a Hokkien word instead. So these words are highly fluid in the language and can be replaced all the time. You might say hun bao or fung bao and ang bao and so on for a red envelope, no? A red packet. Then, of course, culture-specific means an outsider might not even understand the whole utterance. When you would say, my father go to Gao Wong Ye Wan Sen Liao. So goes to this particular god for returning the favor. Then kinship terminology and is often used in Chinese because the kinship system of the Chinese is more elaborated than the English one. And if you speak with the English words, then at least it is less precise. So one may ask, Mei, how old are you? Like that. Now let's move over to morphology. First of all, reduplication is an areal typological feature of the area, and it is also used in English, while in Europe, reduplication is rather rare and restricted. So, for instance, here somebody commented on the internet, can slow consume, can slowly consume. Yeah. I order chocolate cake. We share. So let's share. Or can't play la. Or don't play. Don't joke around. Yeah. Sure you can. Yeah. Cheap one. So it is very cheap. And loanwords can be reduplicated as well. Then there are also forms of triplication, which is even more emphatic. Can. Got. So if we look at a dialogue, can I park my car here? Can, or just can. Yeah. These two same, just different color. So these two are the same. So, or here for buying food, what is this? Same. This one's spicy. So it's the same, but this one is spicy. Reflexive pronouns, basically self, myself, and so on, is used in Chinese ways. Plural is often not marked in the spoken language. So for instance, this is from an email. If you need more example, like that. Then there is a high amount of morphological conversion. So the noun jam, traffic jam, can be used as a verb. Today very jamma. So today it jams. Yeah. On the other hand, in a Singaporean movie, for instance, A Boys to Men, which is completely in Singaporean English, there are a few counter examples where actually loan words get morphologically integrated into English, but I don't remember this from my own experience. So decanted, Samsyong apple, from Samsyong Hokkien, and the English apple. And the most funny word may be Mumper Siasui Kan, Siasui Hokkien to embarrass, and Mumper and Kan are Malay affixes, and the utterance was don't Mumper Siasui Kan our group. But I think these are very recent developments after many people have learned the standard language and the standard morphology, because this is not even used in colloquial Malay. So why should it influence any other language? Some derivations are interesting. Maluation from malu, shame, and I saw the word beautility in Penang. Beautility for beauty. So this happens sometimes. There are also certain semantic differences between the meaning in Malaysian English and Standard English. So, for instance, the word tackle is to court. So, why do they use a Leng Chai one? Want to tackle Leng Luya? Leng Chai is a handsome guy, Leng Lui, a beautiful girl. So, want to tackle. So, you want to court. Yeah. The word some more is has the meaning moreover, some more. Yeah. And then there are interesting differences. For instance, the verb follow is used exactly as the Chinese verb gen. Yeah? And in Chinese, one might say, 我可以跟你的车吗? So, can I ride with you? And they translate this into, can I follow your car? So, this actually, we had this experience, leads to misunderstanding, for instance, with Indian English speakers. They would not understand that. Yeah. The word simply expresses humbleness. So, for instance, your noodle is very delicious. No la, I just simply cook one. So I did it without particular intention. This seems to translate sui bien. So very often one can actually show that English, Chinese words or structures are directly translated into English, specific English words. For instance, yesterday you say, you give me a treat today. You invite me today. And the answer, yes, ne, no la. I simply say one. I said it for fun. I simply say one. Yeah? I think I already mentioned that. Sorry if it's not perfectly ordered here. Get on the car is Malaysian English and may reflect Changche and Xiache. Get off the car. Get down the car, they say. Get down the car. Xiache. Yeah. I mentioned that. So the interesting question which slowly arises, why is there actually a Chinese substrate in Malaysian English? Sure, there are Chinese speakers, but we experienced very similar examples with Malay speakers. Data which I did not include completely here in this presentation, but they agreed using the same structures. So why would the Malays use a Sini-sized form of English? And one might hypothesize that both English and colloquial Malay have been strongly influenced by the relatively strong, long-standing presence of Chinese in Malacca, later Penang and Singapore, who influenced these spoken languages to a high degree because, for instance, as middleman minority, they had a lot of contact with all other groups and were economically well off and so on, and well educated. And so they could influence these languages. Because we find in Malay, similarly in spoken Malay, structures which are actually copied from Chinese. So now another point, last point, 2 points more, is syntax. First of all, the utterances are usually very short. Junctors are not necessarily used in the same way as in English. So here, this is a signboard from Baba Chali, the famous Peranakan Baba Nyonya restaurant in Malacca. Once you take, no return. So don't touch. So there is brevity of many statements. For instance, people would say, raining, how? So it's raining, what shall we do now? Traffic jam, want to go? Like that. Yeah? Like that, how? If that is the case, what shall we do now? Or like this, what we change to another day. Yeah? See how first. A few days ago in southern Thailand, I heard a man say, look see. That was a Malaysian speaking English. Look see is go and have a look. Yeah? Look see. With reduplication. Yeah? See how la. No need, don't need. no need. No, that's frequent. Wait, coming. Or hon him, honk at the car. Yeah. And in Malaysian Chinese, it would be honda. So once again, we see this great similarity between the languages. Yeah. So, for instance, are you going to Alan's party? See how first. So I must first check. Yeah. Then what car you buy now? Volkswagen. Oishe man, very expensive one. Okaya. Okaya means it's not so bad. Yeah? And because the pronouns can be omitted, one might encounter, I want to carry, in the meaning, I want you to carry me. So it very much follows Chinese habits all the time. Like that, we have seen this several times already, is of course Zhe Yang. Like that, we go eat pizza. Appears very frequently instead of then we go eat pizza. What was that? Anyong in Hakka is the same Zhe Yang. Yeah. Nihem gi choi cheti I wui cho taxi. Koloi anyong go kyak. So you ask him at jetty, that place, take taxi, cross, come, like that, faster. And in Malaysian English, they would say, you ask him to take a taxi from jetty to come here, like that, faster. So this is the like that construction. Verbal suffixes are often omitted, so there are no the and maybe ing endings. And for instance, here we have a conversation with a Malaysian English speaker in Europe, in London, and the child does speak Chinese in Malaysia. Yes, when she go back for holiday with grandpa and grandma, she know how to switch as well. Yeah? So this is perfectly normal all the time in this conversation. Then pronoun use is different. It can be omitted, we have seen, but then it is inserted also. I think the young, they are really, really good. Again, I think this is a South Chinese habit of doing it. Yeah. Also, the copula can be omitted, just like in Chinese. Copula is the verb to be in John is teacher, like in the such construction. So you can say, my car so old already. My car is so old already. And or you may say, this your car, which means, is this your car? Careful, laksa very hot. So the laksa is very hot. Today, weather very hot. Shikuda. Yeah. So I once asked the speaker, is it good, the new car? And he answered, gooda. Yeah. Then, is this in this chapter? I think that is explained a little bit below, so I jump over it. Yeah, the Chinese word dou, which is usually translated as all, but has a function word meaning, is always translated by also. And we can show that. What do you want to eat? What also can la? What also can la is a copy from Chinese, 什么都可以. Yeah. So what all can. He's so capable. Everything also he wants to know. Yeah. 什么都要打听. So it is clearly influenced by underlying Chinese. There was a McDonald's ad in Singapore mentioned in Bao. Everything also want. That was written on signboards. 什么都要. Every time also like that one, he is always like that. So very clearly also is the standard translation of do. Aspect marking is also practically identical with Chinese, and this has been described for Singaporean English already. The word already exactly replaces the functions of le, liao, and guo is replaced by ever, and yao is replaced by got, and one is replaced by the word finish. So these secondary verbs or converbs are actually used in the sense of the Chinese aspect system. So let me find an example. Yeah, maybe here for already. I eat the cake already. That means I have eaten the cake. My son go to school already, which means my son has left already for school. My car sell already. So they can say sell or sold. It depends on how well they know English. My car sell already. My car has been sold. Let's go see Minion 3. I see liao liao. So one can also attach liao to the English verb. It has been described in the literature that also the so-called inchoative use exists. I don't want to eat durian already means I will eat no more durian. I want to eat durian already. I can't wait to eat durian. I cannot go inside already means there's no more space to go in. So already is quite important and has become a function word, giving us exactly the functions of le. Both functions of Chinese. Got is the standard translation for yo, to have. So, of course, it can have the original meaning. It also expresses a certain aspect, and it often comes with a locative element, meaning there are. So, and then there is an idiomatic expression, where got, which is a rhetorical question. So you would say, got 2 pictures on the wall. And that, of course, is, again, a Chinese pattern, Qiangshang you liang chang chao pian. They got a new Japanese restaurant. So there is a new Japanese restaurant. Now got discount. They have discount offer. So this is quite versatile and more easy to use. I got kana ambateko. So I hit the lottery. That's an I imagine dialogue. We never hit it. I got kana ambateko. Ambateko, of course, Malay. Kana also. Wait, you got see my phone or not? So have you seen? Got see. And I hope you can see over all these many examples, it is really a different grammar. It really introduces new grammar to this kind of English. I got a dog. I have a dog. Last time I got a dog. Last time I got a dog. One. Yeah, one comes later. And where got this dress very red? Where got? That means I don't think so. Yeah? And again, this would be Naliyo in Chinese. Yeah? You still owe me 20 ringgit. Where got? No, I don't. So it questions the assertion of the other person. Why you every time also like that one? Where got every time? So that means it doesn't happen all the time. Yeah. So you should do exercise. Where got time? Well, I have no time. Or how could I insert that? Where got money to buy new car? Or our boss wants us to agree on a pay cut. Where got like that one? So we have like that, and we have one which I have not yet explained. How are passives constructed in Singaporean or Malaysian English? There are papers about this. The kana, Malay word kana, which means to receive, to be hit, something like that, is a passive, forms passives, both in spoken Malay and in English. So one might encounter John kana scolded by his boss. John was scolded. And please note that in the literature often the morphology of English is present, but people may also say John kana scolded by his boss. Or they may even use the give passive. The older speakers of Chinese, they might say John give his boss scold. It is interesting to note that in Malaysian, we find a similar situation. Standard Malay would say, dia dimarahi oleh bosnya. So he was scolded by his boss with morphology. But in spoken Malay, one might say, dia kena marah oleh dia punya bos. So now we can see the same language again, that there is an analytic formation of passive with kana, and we have an analytic formation of the possessive. Punya means to own in Malay. So punya has the function of the in Chinese. And while this example is from Bahasa Basa, by which we mean a Chinese speaker, we found agreement among Malay speakers that they would also say it this way. Maybe they prefer dengan, another preposition. But in spoken Malay, this is actually a formation of passive, and this is the school-mediated version only. One can be fined an impersonal passive, can kena saman. And in standard Malay would be boleh disamankan. So we can see here again how the languages actually mix. This might be considered an English utterance, but it is 2/3 Malay anyway. So basically there are two passives, the kana passive, as we have just seen, he kana scold, and to some degree there is a give passive, which is also a copy from Chinese. And most interestingly, bun minga in Hakka would be give people, would be an impersonal passive. And in Malay, the Chinese speakers may say kasih orang, give people, exactly the same construction. And the Malay speakers understand, but reported they might not use it themselves. So this is the complex situation, which, by the way, would lead to the interpretation that they speak the same spoken Malay, but in slightly different forms. So we find ethnolects, ethnically defined sociolects of the same language. So he give people hit. This would be an example for a give passive. He was hit. Give people for an impersonal passive. And as I just said, kasi orang in Malay or Bunginga in Hakka or Geiran in Chinese if you want, it would be construed in the same way. And I think that's the really interesting thing in when looking at the linguistic situation in Malaysia. If people do la, let somebody else do it. Actually, passives are not frequent, just as in spoken Chinese. What is used instead is the Chinese topic prominence structure. You can move anything to the front to make it prominent. So my mother made this cake, that's normal English. You could also say, this cake, my mother made one. And this cake, my mother made one, is exactly the structure you might expect in Chinese. 这个蛋糕我妈妈做的. And you may ask, this cake, your mother made one? So even with a question suffix. Also, you may find utterances such as, fish you want? Do you want fish? Expensive, the durian here. My parents old-fashioned are. Yeah. And this leads us to maybe the last point in syntax, which is the use of one in Malaysian English. It is, as you have seen in several examples already, used in a non-standard way. It actually corresponds to the use of Chinese the. Again, they can be literally translated and they are closely connected to topic prominence because this the construction, should the construction and similar in Chinese are also used to create different information structure. So, yeah, here the example is, why you so gaily one? Dirty liao, some more you want to eat. So, why are you so disgusting? You're dirty and and anyway you want to come to the table. Yeah. So how would that play out in Hakka, for instance? So makai ngiang gelie. Let's liao han oina loisit. So again, we can see it is practically the same in all the Semitic languages, and it is very similar with English. And in English, we find the one exactly where we find these relative markers. For instance, here in a kind of should construction. So you may hear, you're always so slow one. You are always so slow. My friends say, Nike shoe, very comfortable one. Where got so lazy people one? So how can there be such a lazy person like you? Yeah. This time the opposition sure win one. This time the opposition will win. Yeah. Sure got one. You can find one. So, what about the Chinese and Southeast Asian habit of using co-verbs and serial verb constructions? We already had the verb follow. I follow you, go trekking is presented by Bao 2010. And this is, of course, a translation from Woganichu trekking. Bao, by the way, speaks about Singaporean English. But as I said, I cannot find a difference. Similarly, the verb dao, to arrive, is very often, if not always, translated by the word until into Malaysian English. So how does that work? Why you paint the wall until like that? Yeah? And that is, of course, a copy of 你为什么把墙画到这样？画到. So when you find until, you can be sure there would be dao in the corresponding Chinese utterance. Yesterday, Patricia talked until very happy. So 昨天 Patricia 讲到很高兴. Yeah. So that is a very interesting reinterpretation. Dao clearly is a secondary verb to jiang. And in English, it is used like this preposition or verb affix, difficult to say. Teacher talk until we all fall asleep. So he spoke. So, and then you have this destinative aspect, Dao, and this is translated with until. I had another one which I like very much. Yeah, this is also quite good. She watched TV until Rice also forgot to cook. So she watched TV and thereby completely forgot to cook. Yeah, and Rice also forgot. Let's look at that in spoken Chinese in Malaysia. Fan dou wang ji chu. It is an exact copy of the word order. It is not standard Chinese. And on this occasion, I want to emphasize once more, when comparing the spoken languages, it doesn't help to compare with the standard languages. One has to compare all the spoken vernaculars. Yeah, I found this online, a review for a hotel. A great night's sleep and relaxation. I like the room so much until I forgot I was sleeping in a hotel room. So here again, we can immediately see the Malaysian speaker, possibly even unaware of using a non-standard construction of English. Yeah. Now, since we are in syntax, of course, clause combining. Very often, the combination of clauses is asynthetic, which means there are no junctors, no conjunctions. I tell you, you don't tell people ah. I tell you, but you don't tell others. Now I wait for my new car come. I wait for my new car to come. I want to see Nike got cheap shoe or not. I want to see whether Nike got cheap shoes or not. Okay, now you use your phone to call me. Sometimes the two does occur. I think it's okay. I think that it is okay. I think it is okay. I go to GPG, renew license. So I go to this administration to renew the driving license. If you can print for me, then I can save money la. So if and then, like the Jew in Chinese. Yeah? I think that's finally about syntax. The questions. The question formation in Malaysian English again follows very much Chinese patterns. You would say, how you know? My friend, tell me one construction. Yeah? And 你这么知道我朋友告诉我的 again, all the grammatical features are the same. You got watch, this is from the literature, you got watch PCK last night or not? Or not, the or not question. That is a Chinese influence. PCK is Phua Chu Kang. That is the name of a Singaporean guy. And this is a sitcom, which was also very popular in Malaysia. Wait, you got see my phone or not? So very often you have the or not question. Which is a translation of the South Semitic, for instance, in Hakka, you would say Mao. Niayim kopi Mao. So you want to drink coffee or not? That is the construction. And then the tag, is it, may be attached to a sentence. He's going to buy a car, is it? Which is also not standard English, where you might have, isn't it? So we can conclude that especially in syntax, we found plenty of proof or of hints to hypothesize that Malaysian English is very heavily influenced by Chinese patterns, South Chinese patterns. And in this way, if one bothers to compare it to the already extinct China Coast Pidgin, it is quite similar. And this goes so far as to some tiny degree, such structures even went as far as Tok Pisin, the Creole of Papua New Guinea. And one might consider the fact that very often also on plantations all over Southeast Asia, there were Chinese overseeing the work of other people. And so maybe that is part of the explanation of why Chinese has influenced lingua francas like English or Malay so much in the whole area. Now, one last chapter about pragmatics. So the connotative meaning of utterances. And again, there are substantial differences between Standard English and Malaysian English. First of all Malaysian languages, all languages in that area, use clause final discourse particles, a whole range of them, la, lo, le, a, o, ho, ma, me, and so on. And they are used, of course, in the same way, and they are pragmatic markers. They are described in the literature quite well for all kinds of languages. Now, look at these examples. I want to sleep liao, that is the Chinese liao. Tired la, you are, don't sleep so late ha. And they are really frequent and attached to very many utterances. Sorry lo, I don't know ma, I did not know. Yeah. Sorry la. So it has slightly different pragmatic functions. You think it's funny, me? Do you think you are funny? Or you think that is funny, what you're doing? Yeah? So me. Then we go eat pizza lo. Okay, if that doesn't work out, then let's do something else. Not like that. Okay la, we go now wa? Are we going now, finally? Yeah la, if not later, traffic jam. Today, Friday, So since today is Friday, there will be a traffic jam. So one might try to give the meanings of these affixes. As I said, is not specific to English. I do it lo, affirmative. I do it la, willingly. I do it do I have to? I do it I do it ha. Okay. I do it war. I do it for you. Yeah? I do it gua, maybe. I do it one. I did it. Or it is done by me. I did it. Yeah, I do it le. I do it liao, and so on. I do it what? I do it me. Really? I do it. I do it ho. So I assume I have done it. Yeah. There is no point describing this for English alone. It is used in all these languages in the same way. There are also a few prefix discourse particles such as walau, choi, jalak. And then there are such expressions as we have already seen, wegot, and I gave you that already. And then, of course, one might say cultural concepts such as losing face. Yeah, he got no face. He has lost face, and so on. There are various idiomatic expressions. We might look at a few. No need is very frequent. Until vomit blood. That means to a high degree. No? Your head is a frequent utterance. So let's look at an example. I teach him so many times already until vomit blood. He still don't understand. Yeah. So I made a great effort. Mommy, I'm hungry. Hungry your head are. That is a rejection of the wish. Yeah. You just eat McDonald's already. You have just eaten. Yeah? Can we go to Hong Kong for holiday? Go your head. Where got money? So that's how it is used. Yeah. Or the word die appears often in this idiomatic function. This time, if you don't help me, I die la. So you really need to help me. Yeah. You want to see me die, is it? If I help you, then I also die. So one could speak like that. Our company want to sex staff die la. So that's very bad. No? If my mother knows, then I die. Yeah. So, and maybe I believe that's the last example. So we might mention that here. Tsuji, self. And tsuji che is to eat yourself, literally. But che tsuji means you do it on your own. You eat yourself means you do it on your own in Chinese. And so this can translate into English. You eat yourself, so you eat for yourself. And you yourself eat. You eat it, I don't want to do that. And now the idiomatic part. That is an imagined dialogue, of course. But that's how you may joke around. My wife go to China Liao. So you eat yourself la. So that means you have to serve yourself in any way. And that might be a joke you can make in Chinese, actually. So we come to conclusions. Of course, we see here plenty of convergence phenomena between the languages spoken in Malaysia, and focused on examples from Malaysian English here. This is, of course, a natural phenomenon as all these languages meet each other in the brains of the multilingual speakers. And we can see that certain languages are first languages of the speakers. For instance, South Semitic varieties, and their structures are copied onto Malaysian English, onto English. This leads to this situation, as I've said, of bahasa rojak, of language mix. But it is not strictly speaking a mix. Actually, one language is chosen as the basis and then experiences a lot of borrowing and loanwords. And because of the syntactic convergence, the structure is usually mostly the same between the languages. So basically the multilingual situation gets eased by the speakers by the grammars becoming more similar. Malaysian English is a distinct but still understandable variety of English. An outsider might be able to understand it if not for the loanwords. And it is an identity marker for Malaysians. It might be called a dialect of English now. And of course, it may be increasingly influenced through education by the standard language, as it is learned better by more and more people in modern times. So very much of the more extremely diverging examples may come from older speakers. And anyway, for an outsider, it is difficult to investigate because they may make an effort towards more standard forms when speaking to me, but when speaking among each other or when they agreed to go along with my request, then it is possible to get such data. That's it. Thank you very much for bearing with me. And if you have any comments, I'm happy to discuss with you.
Thank you so much. The topic is so interesting and also funny, right? So anyone have would like to share or have comment or question, please?
It seems there is a native speaker in the chat. Watch until I forget to eat breakfast. Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm not a native speaker of that. Yeah. So thanks for this additional example.
Yeah, when I study in Singapore, they also have some joke about this, and also have a television program that they satire English of Singaporean, English of Thai people, English of Filipino, and in some sense, like the English of Thai people, we also have the ending particle like going na or going la, something like that. And they said, oh, we are similar. We have a kind of slang like that. But when you come up with the la, lo, member, and there are many meanings, so it's very interesting for me.
I think some are more frequent than others, but indeed one can find a whole range. I do not know from which language they may be coming. They are used in all languages in the same way. I think if I look for comedians on YouTube for Malaysia or other countries, it's a never-ending topic. First of all, they speak a kind of Malaysian English, and second, this playing around with Bahasa Rojak or with this mixing and with the intercultural, that is very frequent, yeah.
But I mean, when you study about the kind of Rojak like this, is always the Chinese, the Cantonese, and the Hokkien, right? That they borrow the term to their English.
I think actually I believe that most of my consultants are Hakkas, because we started with doing Hakka research.
Yeah.
And but in Kuala Lumpur, everybody knows Cantonese. because that is dominant there. In Kajang, the Hakka is dominant, but in Kuala Lumpur city, everybody speaks Cantonese as much as they know Hakka. It depends on who they're speaking to. So if there is a group of Hakkas, then you may insert the Hakka pronunciation. And if there are Cantonese people, then you insert the Cantonese pronunciation of the same word. I found this quite interesting that you can borrow the same word in different phonological varieties.
In terms of the tone, because I don't know Hakka, how many tone of Hakka? For the Cantonese, they have like 9 tone, right? But I'm not quite sure that how many tones of Hakka.
I saw descriptions that Hakka has 8 tones, whereby 2 are dependent on a coda consonant. So you could say 6 to 8. I did not learn to distinguish them because my wife, who is my collaborator and a native speaker of Hakka, ultimately told me it's different in the different dialects anyway, so nobody cares. So I speak the way I like to speak. But there are certainly tones for the native speakers. The other day I mentioned that the young speakers in Vienna, they don't seem to have tone when speaking Hakka.
Maybe Hakka, you cannot say like much tone because it's like a large syllable and dead syllable. So it's just the same tone, but the syllable is short and long. I think the Cantonese is the same. So if different sub-dialect, that's also different. So you can say that actually there are 4 to 6 tones. It depends on you can call it the tонeme or the it's like a subtонeme.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, I completely forgot now in the moment that you wrote about tones in Hakka. And it also became apparent I did not read that. I should do that, yeah.
Okay, there is another question from the chat box. Have Malaysian English speaker adopt standard English intonation patterns?
Actually, the intonation is also very specific for Malaysian English. But I think I'm not good at imitating that, and also I didn't describe it here. But you recognize a Malaysian English speaker very quickly from the intonation pattern. So it is not standard English. I realized that one of our consultants who lives in London since long, she has completely switched to British intonation, but her syntax in spoken English is still very close to Malaysian English. She may not be aware of that. So she changed the intonation and now she sounds British. But so there is a difference. Yeah. What is here? As I know, Kuala Lumpur's Cantonese was influenced by Hakka. Is that true? I do not know. I don't know. I mean, my first and main reference are Hakkas living mostly in Kuala Lumpur, partly in Kajang, the family. And they all also speak Cantonese if necessary. That's what I know. But they told me that Cantonese is the majority in Kuala Lumpur. I do not know. Maybe I cannot safely comment on all of Kuala Lumpur.
I think Hokkien is the majority in Malaysia than Cantonese. So I think Hokkien more influent than Cantonese.
It's now already several years that I figured out the numbers, but as I said today, I believe to remember that the Cantonese are more numerous in Malaysia, and the Hokkien are much more numerous in Singapore, and there are very many Hokkien speakers in Penang. There it is, in the north it is absolutely dominant, and for sure the first settlers were Hokkien. So Peranakan mostly come from Fujian. Yeah, I cannot personally give you any numbers, but that's what I read in the literature. Maybe it's wrong, I don't know. Yes, Penang is mostly in the north. Yeah. In Penang, the Hakka speakers know Hokkien usually for market communication. Actually, my wife worked in Penang for a while, and she had to learn Hokkien. She had to learn to understand Hokkien because the teachers at the school spoke Hokkien all the time with each other. Yeah.
More question? Any comments? I think maybe Thai English also interesting sometimes.
Yes, of course. I'm not yet so acquainted with Thailand, and so I cannot comment on that. But surely, if English becomes more used, it will develop a localized variant, as I'm quite aware that I speak a kind of Austrian English, for instance. And I also have typical errors in my English based on my German background. But then Malaysian English is not, I must add this now, is not errors. It has really nativized, it has localized and has become an informal standard that is used by everybody. It is not a lack of knowledge, but it is knowledge. That's how you speak in Malaysia. Of course, this is undermined by education. When you go to school and you learn correct English and correct Chinese and so on. This is the typical situation of dialects and standard languages. It would be completely the same in Austria, where people speak dialect and a colloquial variety in the cities. But then, of course, when you write the paper, then you must use the codified form of the language.
For the Malaysian English, can we call it that this is a Creole? No. What is the difference between the Creole and that what you mentioned, ethnic?
Yeah. It has been called a semi-Creole because it doesn't fulfill all. Don't ask me for all the details when it is a Creole or not, because I don't have it ready. But the way it has been acquired diverges a little bit from other Creole developments in the world. But it has characteristics of a Creole, the spoken variety. So, you know, I'm not strictly opposed to that, calling it a Creole. It is just discussed in the literature about Creole languages, Holm and others, that it is not completely a Creole, as you might characterize Tok Pisin in Papua New Guinea or all the others that there are. So, yeah, it is somewhere that's why I called it a localized version. I took this also from the literature. Lillian Cao called it a localized version. So this English got a few extra features in Malaysia. Yeah.
As you mentioned about the pragmatics, I think this is the problem of every languages. Like the word is like a in and out, and on and below, on and off, something like that. As you for Malaysian English, as you give the example, so this is mean the oral language, right? It's a oral language. It's the spoken language.
Yes, only spoken. Yeah. Of course, when you write English, then typically every person would attempt to write standard English. There is quite some literature about analysis of newspapers. Since nowadays newspapers are online, it is actually easy to get the corpus of the world corpora for English. And they also include newspapers in Malaysia or Singapore. And then you can run an analysis, look for loan words and constructions. And to some small degree, there are differences in the standard language. So a journalist living in Malaysia, writing in English, let's say in the Star, will have certain constructions and loan words in English which wouldn't be understood or which would be considered to be wrong in England. But so to some degree, it influences the standard language of Malaysia as well. But the bigger differences are found in the spoken language and most probably will not be transferred over to a written language. Yes. Again, this is actually similar to any other language. Let's take German as an example. Austrian German has certain constructions which Austrians might insist to use even in the written form, and which a German would never use. But these are tiny differences. It doesn't hinder understanding. Yeah. So I think to summarize, written Malaysian English has a few features, just like Indian English has. You know, they say it cost 2 lakh rupees, and lakh is not understood in Europe as a number. So certain such things may occur also in Malaysia. Of course, this has a pragmatic implication. If a speaker may be comfortable with his spoken Malaysian English and then feel insecure when writing English because he may feel like he doesn't know the norms of standard English. Very similarly, I believe in Austria, people are more insecure using standard German because they feel like they are using a lesser version of German. Manglish. The question is Manglish or not? I like Manglish very much. Actually, we speak kind of Manglish at home. I found it also quite interesting when we had guests actually from Australia who came to Austria to visit us. They were Malaysian Chinese. And because of our linguistic interest, we just spoke Malaysian English for days. So they can switch from standard English to this Malaysian English. And it's, of course, great fun to do. So. Pragmatically, as I said also in the beginning, Malaysian English has a sense of familiarity, of friendly communication. So, of course, it is an in-group marker of Malaysian people. And so it may not just die out or be completely oppressed, because it's like dialect in other languages, really.
Oh, for this case, what do you think that what is the factors that make the Manquis or the Malaysian English or some dialects still survive in the contemporary society, where we might say that English and Mandarin is the superior, right? So why this dialect still survive?
Do you mean Malaysian English or do you mean the Chinese varieties? Yeah. Yeah, because I'm afraid to say it seems that the South Sinitic vernaculars, such as Hakka, Cantonese, Hokkien, may be on the way out, at least as far as I can tell about Hakka. The people who are now 50 years old are fully competent. The people who are now more than 30 years old, they can speak Hakka, but usually don't. And the younger people don't even try. They will answer in Mandarin Chinese. So very much the similar situation to many other places in the world nowadays, where the standard languages are taking over, certainly in a colloquial form, as Malaysian Mandarin is also not standard Chinese. But it gets, so to say, it goes towards a broader colloquial language. And Malaysian English, that seems to be still going strong, but the younger the people, the more they can speak standard English with ease. I mean, Malaysian standard English. So it is the older people may not be able to speak standard English at all. So they speak Malaysian English exclusively, which is like a language learned in the street. And but the younger people, they can switch over to standard English. This may not kill off Malaysian English, just like, you know, dialects of German move on. They approach to standard German more and more, but they are still there. You don't go to a small town, a village, and speak standard German. You speak dialect. And the same might be the case here. So in short, Malaysian English, I would consider like a colloquial variety or a dialect. And Hakka, I don't know so much about Hokkien and Cantonese, but Hakka at least might no longer be transmitted to the next generation. And let's not forget, there are so many inter-ethnic or interlinguistic marriages. So very often the father is Cantonese, the mother is Hakka, or some such combination. And then Hakka is already out. And then also, as I said, I believe yesterday, there seems to be a very strong interest in teaching the children the useful high language. So they shall learn Chinese and not Hakka. And as I said, in Singapore also, they tried to eradicate Singaporean English in favor of Standard English. And maybe that even succeeded to some degree, but there was a backlash from the population who identify with this way of speaking.
Was there any Hakka textbook that teach my Mandarin? Because in Thailand or in some place we have like the Teochew textbook that teach Mandarin. So I'm not sure that in terms of Hakka, do they have?
Only in Taiwan there are textbooks for Hakka language because it's one of the national languages and it is taught in schools. So people of Hakka students of Hakka descent have to attend these courses. But in Malaysia, I would say there is some amount of mass media for Cantonese, but yeah, there are singers singing in Hakka. That's all. And there are no textbooks. And when you go to a private Chinese school in Malaysia, the medium of education is standard Chinese. And it is even forbidden to use the South Semitic vernaculars. So the same situation as everywhere. They take great care in teaching standard language. I asked actually Hakka speakers why they speak Chinese with each other, even at age 50. And they came up with the explanation, we had to speak Chinese with each other at school. And so we kept the habit lifelong. So they actually gave up speaking Hakka.
I just came from Penang and I go to visit the Hakka Association. They show like a basic conversation, a small book for teach Hakka, like start with a basic vocabulary, Papa, Mama, but they use the pinyin and together with the Chinese character, but pronounced in Hakka dialect.
Oh,
so
yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, now that you're telling me, I remember they also showed us, and I could add also the Hopo Hakka Association in Kulai in Johor State in the south. They had some kind of teaching material and a small dictionary and so on. So there, as everywhere, there are some people who attempt to do this. And at the same time, I would always say, but, learning a language is a huge effort. And I don't really expect many people to take such an effort for a language which is communicatively of limited usefulness. So it is surely nice to speak the language, but basically the small languages totally depend on the people who learned it effortlessly as children, and very rarely you will get second language speakers. I mean, I see it everywhere nowadays. I mentioned the Breton in France, where you have now a radio program in Breton language and so on. So there's much more Breton now out in the open than when I was there many years ago. But at the same time, it has a very heavy French accent, and it is no longer, they are not native speakers. They learned it out of their enthusiasm for their culture. Yeah, one can do that, but ultimately, I believe that this is going to disappear nonetheless, because, I mean, take as an example the European Union. They take all standard languages of the EU as languages of the EU. Everything has to be translated in every single language. Okay. Is it necessary? No. There is not a single politician in the EU who wouldn't be able to read and speak English. No? but everything has to be translated into Lithuanian, Greek, and so on. Now, the EU is favoring multilingualism, and they ask the population to learn EU languages. But I mean, that is fun and great, and I love to learn, let's say, Greek. But then shall a Greek learn Lithuanian and a Polish so that they can communicate with each other? It will not happen. They will speak English. And I'm basically quoting here a sociologist who made this argument. The more languages, the more English, because it doesn't work out. You don't meet Spanish people who happen to speak Polish so that they can communicate with a Romanian. It doesn't happen. They will speak English. And so I don't really believe in maintaining or in trying to keep something alive. If people speak a language, that's great for me as a linguist. But if they stop speaking it, yeah. But yeah, sure, there are efforts everywhere.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your patience to attend all 4 time of public talk. So we hope next time we will have opportunity to invite Professor Rab to give the valuable talk again in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.